I'll quickly introduce our panel and our panelists, basically. So Dhaval and Abhijit, would you mind quickly, introducing yourself, and I'll follow from there. Abhijit.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Ashish, for inviting me here. So my name is Abhijit Singh, and I work as a senior architect for an e-pharma company called PharmEasy. I joined PharmEasy around 2 years back, and I primarily work with the data platform team here at PharmEasy. It's been almost 14 years in the industry, and in the last 7 to 8 years, I've been working with big data, cloud computing, and so on. Prior to PharmEasy, I have worked with startups like Flipkart and Ola Cabs. So at PharmEasy, I, along with my team of very talented data engineers, big data developers, we have managed to build a data platform. And today we support a lot of features, including batch processing, stream processing, things like that, including multi-tenancy and data security. Just to talk about PharmEasy a bit, PharmEasy is a leading startup in India into the online healthcare segment. And using the PharmEasy app, you can order online medicines, book diagnostics at home. You can also do online doctor consultations and things like that. So during these testing times, during the ongoing pandemic, PharmEasy has been very instrumental in helping out the customers by ensuring uninterrupted delivery of medicines, ensuring doctors' availability for online consultations and things like that. So it's been a great journey here at PharmEasy in the last 2 years since I joined. Yep.
Great. Great. Thank you. And Dhaval, would you mind giving your part of introduction quickly? Hey, Dhaval, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Ashish, for inviting me to this webinar. I'm a team lead at the data engineering team at Swiggy. Swiggy, as you know, we were founded in 2014. We are a leading hyperlocal food delivery, food ordering and delivery platform. We process like millions of customer orders every month, close to like 160K plus restaurants on our platform, and about 250,000 plus delivery partners. Yeah, I'm sure you must be using, almost everyone here would be very familiar with Swiggy. So at the data engineering team, we basically process all the data that Swiggy collects in various services. And yeah, excited to talk about all of that in today's session.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you. And before we begin with our, our discussion, quick introduction from my side. Ashish Dubey. I've been working with Qvol for almost 7 years. Currently, I lead our solutions architecture team for international markets, including India, UK, Southeast Asia. And before that, in the past, I have been an engineer at Microsoft and done a ton of big data and BI, ETL work, after Microsoft in another startup, which was a part of Teradata later on. So with that, let me kick it off. So folks, today's topic is very interesting, very practical. I'm sure those who are, in data world, they must be dealing with that dilemma, I would call it. So as you can see, the title of webinar is about data lake and data warehouses. As you know, I observe many places people sometimes use these deployments interchangeably. The terms get confused, etc., etc. However, there's a clear distinction between those two, and that's our goal today, to talk about the significance of each and how a certain use case, certain set of use cases are good fit for data warehouses, and some of the use cases and some of the data-driven opportunities can be unlocked by using an efficient data lake. So that is our goal today. Now, especially with current pandemic situation, the companies which are driven by data, I mean, the data analytics, data science, everything has become a very essential part of it. I mean, it's not that it was not before, but now again, it has put that very interesting challenge in front of all the data-driven organizations to kind of be creative, be innovative, be predictive about their analytics, so that they can lead the lead the journey of their business. So we'll dive into that topic, and as I said, it's a dilemma because many people start with their data journey with databases, RDBMSs, and then they slowly move towards data warehouses. And then, of course, there are certain points, certain breaking points where organizations make decisions to go into data lake because that allows you to do much more, and also it unlocks certain use cases like data science and all those things. So again, I'll hold all of this for our discussion, and we would love to hear a perspective from Dhaval and Abhijit from their experiences with Swiggy and Pharmacy, because most of you must be using these services, and you know how data is important, how these guys are making the service better and innovative. So without any further delay, let me start the discussion. So thanks again, guys, Abhijit and Dhaval. So I would pass this question to you guys. Tell us a little bit about the evolution of your data journeys at Swiggy and Pharmacy. So maybe Dhaval, you can take this question, and then I'll come to Abhijit.
Sure. So at Swiggy, like I said, our data engineering team basically the larger data platform team, so to say, we basically pull data from various sources in the company. Most of these are like relational databases, and in many cases, the data is also pushed via an event ingestion proxy into Kafka. And then all of this data gets into the data lake. And over this data set, we then perform various ETL tasks, fact creation, processing, etc. And some of this data actually goes into the data warehouse. Now, initially, we used like a Presto setup to query this data. But at the scale we were operating at the time, there were some issues, and we, if you know about Swiggy's journey, we actually were just about, I think, 40-45 cities in around 2018, and then we quickly expanded into like almost 500 plus cities. So during that growth phase, it was like we were expecting this growth to happen in terms of the queries that are fired, the data that gets in, and all of that. And with that increase, there were certain issues we faced with our Presto setup at the time, and we wanted to focus more on the Swiggy specific stuff rather than revisiting some solved problems. So we went into a Snowflake data warehouse at the time for our ad hoc and analytical querying requirements, while staying on the data lake for the base data, the raw data. So yeah, that's kind of the landscape from a very high level perspective.
That's great, and we'll revisit this topic, I'm sure, since you have used some very interesting terms like scale and data size. I would definitely I will try to drill into like what do you mean by scale, etc., for the benefit of our audience. But before we go there, Abhijit, how about your journey? How has it been? Like I know you have been with Pharmacy, not for a very long time, but you must have gotten sort of the past snapshot or some of the legacy deployments, etc. So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. To start with, So let me talk about the confusion which exists among the members who use data. Basically, people get confused between databases, data warehouses, and data lakes. And this is something which I felt was the norm when I joined PharmEasy 2 years back. Back then, there were certain ETL pipelines which were running, and we were pulling data from different RDBMS databases, and everything was going to AWS Redshift. So we are on AWS Cloud. So Redshift was the whole and soul, destination wherein people could do their analytical querying. It was the one spot where entire data was being pushed. It was hardly 2 months when we started seeing emails regarding how Redshift was slowing down. And we had back then started the TV commercials. So the customer base was increasing, the orders were increasing, and Redshift one side was giving us scaling issues. So every now and then we could hear about disk getting full, query slowness, there were query optimization issues and things like that. Since I was new into the company, I was forming my data platform team over there. So the only option which was left back then was to add certain nodes to Redshift cluster. So from the 2-node cluster to 4-node clusters, and within 6 months, it was around 8-node cluster. And every few weeks, we would hit across the same roadblock. Now, such roadblocks for a startup like PharmEasy, which was growing leaps and bounds, the customer base and the orders were increasing. It was not healthy for the organization. And that is when we decided that we will revamp the architecture. And that is when the architecture 2.0 started. What we did was first, we wanted to separate the storage and the compute, which was a basic problem in Redshift. The storage and compute comes together and the cost is very high. Even if you wanted to add a node to the existing cluster, you would take a downtime. And these downtimes were killing us. Secondly, because of the concurrency issues, you could not run too many queries in parallel. That was an issue again. So first, what we decided was we'll separate the storage and the compute. And the best option to do that was to use S3 as the storage. And we used Hive as our compute engine. We switched to Hortonworks HDB platform to manage our big data infra. We started using Kafka as our messaging service. And within 3 months of time, we built a data lake as such with S3 and Hive as your query engine. With this, we did not stop using Redshift, but yeah, we had some place wherein we could push n number of data. We were pulling data from different sources. And since the company was growing, we had to pull data from multiple sources, like third parties, certain APIs. We integrate with other third-party vendors as well. So bringing data at one place was the biggest challenge. And since the storage at Redshift was limited, we came up with this data lake. Now everything was fine. Things were going smooth, but very soon we hit upon a new roadblock. What exactly was that? So basically, with the big data systems, when you play around with open sources, many times you come across certain bugs. And when we hit our first bug, it took us a couple of days' time to patch it up, fix it. And again, that was a major downtime for some critical dashboards and reports. And that is when we realized that probably we should start building a DevOps team as well, which could basically manage the big data infra for us. But again, that was again a costly and time-taking affair. So the other option left was to look for certain premium, paid or subscription-based software offerings, which would help us manage the infra. Again, we did a lot of research. We came across a lot of tools, so some of the tools basically had the issue of not supporting most of the big data stacks. And some tools were so expensive that it was way beyond, startups, you can say, it didn't fit in the budget of the PharmEasy as a startup. So we came across Qubole. Qubole supports a lot of big data stacks. And in fact, I had used Qubole in my previous company, Ola Caps. So Qubole was one of the best options for us. And that is when version 2.0 became version 3.0. And within 2 weeks of time, we migrated to Qubole using the entire infrastructure on Qubole. All of our scheduled jobs were moved to Airflow on Kubol, and things were like, up and back again in 1 month's time. So today we use Kafka, we use Kubol for our big data infra. We use Redshift majorly as a data warehouse, though there are certain historical data still there because of some legacy dependencies. In 2 years of time, we have managed to build a decent data lake and a data warehouse with decent amount of data security and multi-tenancy. So that is how it shaped up in the last 2 years. We are still building a lot of things, and let's see.
Sure, and we'll talk about some of the aspects you kind of mentioned. And we'll talk about the technical architectural kind of decision making, etc. But before we go there, it would be interesting to hear some business aspect of things. And what I mean by that is, as you know, at Swiggy, Dhaval, you mentioned that there are like so many users, and the traffic. I can imagine how heavy that traffic would be and how many events it would be generating for you. So maybe you guys, both of you, can talk about the business side of use cases, like how do you guys, leverage data, the power of data, and feed that into your business insights and decision making. So would be interesting to hear more on that. So maybe again, Dhaval, you can take this first, and then I'll come to you, Abhijit.
Sure. So with respect to use cases, basically there are different types of users who need data, right? One is the typical analytics users who want to do BI reporting, who want to basically have ad hoc and exploratory analysis, etc. For example, how many orders did you do yesterday, for example, right? Or how many request IDs did we receive? There are some users who are from, because Swiggy is like a hyperlocal business, there are city teams who largely belong to operational, they are operational teams. So they have their own analysis needs, like how many orders did my city do, in a very simple example. And there are, of course, there are ETL requirements where we create facts and dimensions, and these are mostly scheduled and regular load, predictable load. And there are data science users who want to build models and do predictive analysis, etc. So that's largely the landscape. Yeah.
Good. Thanks. Abhijit, coming to you with the same question, since you guys sort of, you are into different kind of, model where you ensure fast delivery of medicines to, end user, so I can just visualize that use case in my mind, but it would be interesting to hear from your side, how are you guys leveraging data engineering side of things today? How are you guys leveraging data science for your business goals? It could be whatever, right? Faster turnaround time, whatever challenges you have. So yeah, why don't you talk about that and give us some more insights around that?
Okay. So see, like I mentioned earlier, data at one place was the biggest challenge. And once we achieved that, our day-to-day business analytics, data analytics, everything was in place. Data science, machine learning are playing a crucial role in PharmEasy. In fact, a lot of our pricing and ranking algorithms, we are being driven through data science and ML. I'd like to talk about two special use cases which actually helps PharmEasy a lot in terms of driving the business. One is the demand prediction. Now, demand prediction is very critical when it comes to an online healthcare company like PharmEasy. Basically, because of the different geographical regions within India, there are different kinds of diseases, and there are different kinds of let's say, for example, COVID is one of those pandemics which has happened just now. So how quickly you scale to those needs is a big challenge. So in fact, with the COVID coming in, we quickly came up with a chatbot, and that was again driven through the data platform which we had built. Coming back to one more use case, let's say search. So as a normal consumer, when I go to pharmacy app and I try searching for a medicine, I might misspell the medicine names basically, because these names are basically a bit weird and difficult to spell. So search is something which is very critical for us because we lose out on a lot of customers because of that. So search is currently integrated with the data platform, and we try to avoid null searches a lot. Similarly, our recommendation engines are driven through data platform. And in fact, going forward, we have started working on digitizing the prescriptions. Prescriptions basically are mandatory as per Indian government's mandate. You cannot order medicines without a prescription. Now, a lot of manual effort goes into digitizing those prescriptions. Most of our patients are chronic in nature, so it's better we digitize those prescriptions, the details, the medicine information, so that we can send out a reminder to the customer saying that, hey, why don't you fill your the medicines which might be getting over in a month's time. So digitization is very difficult because right, like it's difficult to understand the handwritings of the doctors. It's not human actually. I mean, it's very difficult. So today this thing is happening using some manual mechanism, but pharmacy is working towards that to digitize everything automatically. And a lot of machine learning data science is being used towards that. And we also manage master data database basically, so that different medicines, somebody might call a medicine using the product name, somebody might call a medicine using the brand name or the molecule name, for example, paracetamol. So mapping all these medicines based on their tags is very critical for us as well. And again, data is playing a crucial role over there.
Yeah, I can imagine that, when you talk about digitization of prescriptions, etc. That's a very interesting problem, but quite a challenging problem. So we'll continue to hear from you guys. All right. So switching gears towards some more interesting challenges. So far, I mean, we try to learn from you guys about technical side of things and use cases. Now, it's pretty obvious. You guys are getting tons and tons of data every day. And there is a desire, there are goals from the business perspective that, hey, we want to achieve that. Like you said, digitization is one part. There might be many other competing priorities. So how do you guys track your data investments? And by that, what I mean is oftentimes in open data lakes kind of architectures, it's very easy to democratize your data. You can onboard hundreds of analysts. You can bring like several data scientists on board without really spending time on the onboarding path, which used to be the case in the past, or even in many other proprietary type of tools and platforms. But democratization comes with another challenge, like how to really track the investments, how to make sure that you're not really going beyond certain budget and things like that. So that might be interesting if you guys can touch upon your best practices and some of your mantras, like, hey, this is what we follow at our company as a part of our culture or whatever. Could be anything. So over to you, maybe Dhaval, you can take a first stab, and then Abhijit.
Sure. So of course, the ROI depends on what value we get out of the effort that we put in. Effort in terms of like the cost, in terms of actual money, as well as there are various types of costs, right? Do we do something now versus build something and do that analysis later? Or the maintenance cost, how many issues do we face after the implementation? What is the value we get out of it? In our journey till now, we have seen the main topics that we've been concerned about is the ease of use, of course, authorization, authentication, the security aspects of it are constant all along, and the reduction of the failure rates. So ultimately, it all depends on how well we optimize on these things while paying minimum cost. Um, and in the journey I mentioned, the journey to the data warehouse was largely due to that. It's a build versus buy decision, so to say, right? So uh, uh, with respect to centralized authentication, authorization, the failure rates, all of that, there are a lot of things that we were able to do in the data warehouse ecosystem with Snowflake. But that takes care of that gives you the value at the cost of just ingesting data to that warehouse, for example, right? But at the same time, those things don't directly apply to things like ETLs, for example, right? ETLs are mostly performed by teams, by data teams, like just one team, one role, or one username, one headless user performing a set of tasks, maybe creating facts, dimensions, and a curated data set, and that's it. Versus different city teams, operations teams, analytics, all of them querying the data at the same time. So the value of doing a data warehouse we saw in the analytics domain, but the value of keeping the raw data and the maybe the facts and the dimensions data on data lake, we saw that value in keeping the data in the data lake. And of course now, that story is kind of during the expansion phase, right? Now we have the COVID phase, which is like companies are including Swiggy, we are very cost agnostic, right? So for every single query, we ask the question, or every single like schedule or workflow, we ask the question, is it really needed? So towards that, then we start, we basically start doing some experiments on where is it cheaper to do that analysis. So in our journey, we have basically done a do it now kind of thing versus, and like in the build versus buy, we do buy when the the situation demands us to scale very rapidly, and scale is more of a concern than cost. And then once we are in the stable state, we actually think about now we technically there are no query failures and all of that, and now how do we reduce cost? So that's kind of
yeah, that gives a good picture. So if I gathered all the points correctly, basically you're bringing up some interesting points, that when you have like massive amounts of like facts, dimension, whatever, right? I mean, all those raw data sets, data lakes play out very well on the cost, and it allows you to rapidly expand without really thinking about how to do those things, etc. So that's great. How about you, Abhijit? Any thoughts or any practices or some of the suggestions, whatever you want to add?
Yeah, sure. So at PharmEasy, so most of the things were initially outsourced because again, the same discussion, build versus buy. But as and when we started progressing with the data platform, we started building a lot of things in-house. So we always had some cost in our mind, like what if we bring something in-house? What would it be in terms of cost, the time taken, the resources, and things like that. But the driving factor was not only the cost, but also the flexibility which you would get in terms of adding new features or enhancing the existing features. Like I said, we were using Redshift primarily 2 years back, and there was not much data governance in place. It was difficult to figure out which team, which tenant is making use of or making use of the the cluster as such, be it the scheduled jobs or be it the ad hoc queries which were getting fed. So at PharmEasy, the analytics teams are aligned with business verticals, and as the company kept growing, we had more analytics members joining, data scientists joining the company. So with Redshift, obviously it was becoming difficult. When we came to Ambari, basically Hortonworks SDP, it was a little simpler for us to do the cost computation because we could add the nodes on the fly, and there was no downtime required. And we could also do a queue-based, we can basically monitor the users and allocate certain queue bandwidth to the users. So to some extent, we were able to monitor the cost, but it was not that accurate. There were a lot of experiments to be run. There were a lot of new initiatives to be taken. And with Qubole, that thing became pretty easy. What we did was, based on Qubole's advice, we segregated basically the users or the set of users into different accounts within PharmEasy. For example, ETL runs on a separate account, analytics runs on a separate account, and so does the core engineering work for search and recommendation in different accounts. And we had separate clusters for different use cases, like a Spark cluster for a Spark use case, a Hive cluster for a Hive use case. And with the Qubole's cost tracker, basically the QCH, the Qubole compute unit tracker, we could easily figure out how much bandwidth, how much cost we are spending on ETLs, how much we are spending on the analytics side of things, how much we are spending for integration with the core platforms, the products. So basically today, with certain amount of data governance, we have a lot of control over the cost which we are spending. And we do quarterly plans, what could be the expected expenditure for certain new initiatives. It's become easy because we know beforehand, how much Qubole units would be required based on the past experience. So we are almost plus minus 30% around the cost which is required. So yeah, cost calculation has become a little simpler nowadays, and we are able to do a lot of data governance as well, segregating the accounts.
That's great. That's great. All right. Now moving on, and probably I'll try to get some more. Probably we'll get a little more technical. So you guys talked about scale. You guys talked about concurrency. The challenges around rapid growth of data. So maybe very briefly, if you guys want to, give some ballpark numbers, your measurement criteria that, hey, if my data requirement is so and so, if my data size is so and so, or if my requirement of latency is this, we use some data warehouse or whatever, and if we are going above a certain threshold. So basically, what I'm trying to gather is your architectural decisions, right? As you mentioned, there's still a small footprint of data warehouse, but for larger expansion, you guys are kind of feeding that into data lake. So what are those key points? What are those some ballpark numbers? And the reason I'm asking, because oftentimes these details are missed out when people talk about scale. It's hard to imagine what scale you're talking about. Is it like some hundreds of gigabytes or some hundreds of terabytes, or even to the range of petabytes? So yeah, that would be good to probably briefly touch upon some of those key numbers. Maybe Abhijit, you can start on from your side, then we can talk about Swiggy's kind of data architecture.
Sure. Yep. So at PharmEasy, the biggest problem is not the volume; it's the variety. But in the previous companies where I've worked in, let's say Flipkart and Ola Cabs, the biggest problem was volume. So we were processing around 7 to 8 terabytes of data per day, and that was way back in 2015-16. At PharmEasy, we do run hundreds of pipelines on a daily basis, and we pull around a few hundred gigs of data on a daily basis. And this is something which is not keeping the clickstream data in mind. I mean, the clickstream integration is still going on, and I can see the volume growing in the coming few months. Now coming back to the question, like how do we decide the architecture? So basically the idea is to bring all the raw data at one place, and that is how the data lake is formed. Now storage is something which has to be cheap. AWS S3 is quite cheap, and we do store all of our data, all our historical data, all the mutations in the data at one place, though they are segregated properly. But our major challenge with Redshift data modeling, because running such complex joins on Redshift was slowing it down. So today the data modeling happens on Hive and the aggregates are pushed to Redshift. And our BI tools, they basically talk to the Redshift cluster. So we use Hive primarily for our data modeling, for running certain Spark jobs, for running our data science operations. Since we are also using Kafka, a lot of stream processing also happens on the file. And the data lake basically is maintaining the historical data. Tomorrow, if you need, let's say, some historical data for building up a new feature or new product, you have not lost it, which probably was going to happen with Redshift being the sole data warehouse or a data lake. But we have so much data with us. And for a startup like PharmEasy, which is sitting on so much of data, like I talked about the chatbot, right? We already had so much of data with us. And today, rolling out any new feature is actually a bit easy in terms of data, because we have like 5 years of data with us now. And like I said, Redshift continues to be our data warehouse, and we use it only for certain limited things. But majority of data analytics happens on the data lake, which is Hive with S3.
Got it. Oh, that's good. Dhaval, how about you guys? I know you guys use like Presto, Spark, like you name it. So maybe talk about some data points, something which can help people visualize that scale, etc.
Sure. So at Swiggy, our main problem was number of queries on the warehouse. So of course, volume and the volume of data is also a problem, but the the issue that affected us most when we were using Presto as a query engine was the number of queries, largely concurrency kind of issues. So basically, with Presto, what happened was Presto does not have like a caching layer, right? So the data, when you fire, let's say, like a count query or a min max or whatever kind of like aggregate query, it actually reads at least the files from the storage, and it will do all those calculations. In the case of an ad hoc querying scenario where most of the users are doing queries like these, where most of the users, every day in the morning, a city operations guy, the first thing he wants to know is how much orders did my city do yesterday, right? And maybe divide it into zones and look at the trends and whatever. So these are ad hoc exploration, but they are always happening over the same data set, more or less. So that was one issue where if you had a caching, the time that these queries took would be drastically reduced. The other problem was, of course, data security, authentication, authorization, etc. With Presto, there is, I know that now there are a lot of these problems are solved. Like I think Qubole is already, we do. You have like Apache Ranger integration, etc. But at the time, that was not there. So so essentially, it meant we either had to build something for that kind of having that authentication authorization framework in place, or we buy, right? So that was another direction we saw with data warehouse. And so then overall, the direction that we took was then we were already doing the ETLs and fact processings, and yes, there is stream processing, like Abhijit mentioned. Even we have a lot of stream processing that happens on the data lake, which of course you can't do it in data warehouse. So all of those things stay in the data lake, while the aggregates and the data that analytics needs for ad hoc exploratory analysis, like the ones that I mentioned, those stay in the data warehouse. So the advantage of doing it this way is that the ETL and the fact processing queries are pretty much, they are well known. They are predictable. Basically, you know how much data is going to come, more or less. You know how much time it is going to take, and with some tuning, you know how much memory and all of that. So you can actually tune the infrastructure to specific queries, and there are very fine level controls that we use so these are Kubol scheduled flows, very fine level controls that we use in terms of exactly how much nodes should this query use. So the advantage that gives you is that, and that coupled with things like spot fleets and etc., that because the predictability of the whole thing, you can super fine tune your infrastructure and save a lot of cost. And these ETL queries are typically very heavy queries. They are not like simple counts over some tables. So that way you have like this the power queries, so to say, on the data lake, and then you push it down to the data warehouse. And the data warehouse, what happens is they typically have a very good chance of keeping these low level aggregates. So if I, let's say for example, do a count on a table, many a times it doesn't even use a resource or any CPU cycle. I mean, any cluster cycles, so to say. It just has the data, it just gets it and gives it to you. So that way, this segregation has helped us a lot. And then for things like, for ML use cases, who are largely like, Spark is the favorite of data scientists, and Spark allows you to connect to both. So it connects to the data warehouse, it connects to the data lake, and that way they get both the data. So that's kind of how those were like the pros and cons, like how we did what we did.
That's great. That's great. Okay, quick time check. I think so there are so many thoughts in my mind and so many questions I wanted to ask, but I'll probably combine all of them and maybe make it as like a sort of a very quick one-liner answer, maybe. That would be great. So we talked about a bunch of things, Spark, Presto, Hive. All of these are open source, engines. Then we compare things with, most of the data warehouses are like proprietary, like, we named Redshift and Snowflake. What are some of the reasons you guys think, and maybe just keep it very, straight, one-liner answer, whatever comes to your mind. Why do you guys think that these open source engines are so popular? That is my first question. And then maybe you guys can probably give 2 tips or 2 points to our audience, that what are some of those traps or some of those best practices or some of the points they should keep in mind. So I just want to make it like very quick, rapid fire type of round. So what do you guys think? Maybe Abhijit, you can start quickly, and then I'll come to Dhaval, and then we'll move towards our final questions and answer round of the webinar.
Sure, Ashish. So talking about open sources, so I'm a big fan of open source. In fact, I've been using it for past so many years. The simple reason being, you share your knowledge, you share your code, you contribute back, and you keep gaining. There's no looking back. There's a huge community which is supporting the open sources. And the way forward is open source itself. Like you cannot be confined to a particular framework or a software unless you are like, matching with the world in terms of the latest trends and technologies. Obviously, you will not be growing accordingly. Coming back to a couple of points. So as an advice, what I would suggest is like, see, both data warehouse and data lake are equally important. And unless you have both the things in mind, unless you plan for it, probably after a few years down the line, you might realize that you have lost certain, data which had like real potential in it. So I would suggest better start with a data lake, because data warehouse can anyways be built out of a data lake. But yeah, both are equally important. And let's not get confused between data warehouses and data lakes and databases. They sound very similar, but they are different things.
Perfect. Thank you. Dhawal, last, your notes about open source and, couple of your advices.
Sure. I think I agree with what Abhijit said. Open source, to me, the main reason why people prefer going towards open source is because it gives you more control. Fine grain control. You have lots of knobs that you can twist and turn, and fine tune it to your use case. Which typically does not happen with closed source technologies, or it happens behind the scenes, that the user doesn't know of. So yeah, I think and to add again to what Abhijit said, I agree with his point that it is not an either or decision, right? It is not as if you either have a data lake or have a data warehouse. In my opinion, a data warehouse is like one of the components in a data lake ecosystem, right? There are many other components. There are I would consider there are ingestion components like Kafka, like event ingestion, all of those things. There are stream processing components like Flink and things like that, where it's not exactly warehouse like. It's not like the data, you have the data and now we are processing it, and then come these technologies like Presto versus Redshift versus Snowflake and things like that. So data warehousing is a specific requirement amongst all of these things. And I think yes, the data lake, so to say, it stores everything, basically all the data. So it is in today's data world, I would say it is almost foolish to discard data, right?
Right.
You should track all the data. You should have all the data. There is no the data that you think is useless right now may be a gold mine tomorrow, right? So with that view, data lake is your buddy. At the same time, you need BI reporting, you need ad hoc analysis, you need all those things that data warehouses are better at doing. So data warehouse can support those use cases, in my opinion.
Great. Thanks. Great insights. So I think it's now time to take some questions.
Yeah. So what happens generally when a customer or a patient uploads his or her prescription through our app, the prescription gets loaded in an image format. And we have a call center wherein we have hundreds of pharmacists who hold a proper diploma in that particular domain. And they are the right set of people who could understand the prescription. And then there is a manual activity which happens. They carefully read out those prescriptions and then they digitize it. So the data goes into a database. Many a times they do call up the patient, confirming certain medicines, the disease. In fact, certain times documentation is recommended, which is offered free of cost by PharmEasy. So that there's no confusion in place. So that is how the digitation happens. And once let's say if you are a chronic patient, once the digitization has happened, let's say you are diabetic, then from next time onwards, all you need is a doctor's prescription saying that you still continue to be a diabetic, and rest of the things are already in place. So this is how the digitization is done, and yep, I think I answered
Great.
all the two questions here. Okay.
Yep. And let's do a bit of a fast forward. I think there's also some
Yeah.
poll results we would like to take a quick look at. So Dhaval, maybe a quick, your thoughts on how did you reach on conclusion while selecting Qubole? What were the key drivers? Maybe you can just talk about just a couple of bullet points at a very high level.
Sure. This was like, I think about 2 or 3 years ago, when Swiggy's data platform team was a very small team at the time. It was, I think we built the data platform later after we built the rest of the org in engineering. So it was a very, very small team, and we had a self-managed Presto cluster. And because of that, the management of that cluster was becoming very difficult. So that's when Qubole came in, where you can create these clusters, configure them, reconfigure them at the click of a button, and it's just very easy to do that rather than having a self-managed cluster.
Great. Cool. All right, next question I'm gonna read. Maybe I'll have to take some shortcuts here also. Maybe Abhijit, you can quickly talk about the transactionality while using Hive. Basically Hive sort of asset type of things. That's what I can interpret. So your thoughts.
Right. So to start with, basically we were using Hive 2, and there was no asset support as such. And for that, we wrote a certain set of Java-based programs, modules, which could go and update the data. So the update used to happen by merging the files, and then we used to write the partitions, the data back to the meta store. Right now we are switching over to Hive 3.0, where there's asset support. We are yet to explore the asset functionalities, but I believe since the world has started using asset to a larger extent, we should be able to utilize it.
Cool. And the next one is it EMR Presto or Starburst Presto? Which one are you referring to? Dhaval, you wanna quickly take it?
Yeah, it's Qubole Presto basically. Our data lake is managed by Qubole, so it's Qubole Presto.
Great. All right. Final question for me: at what scale would usage of Qubole be pragmatic option for a startup? Well, a great question. My perspective on this is it's very agnostic to whether you're a startup or not or whatever. I think ultimately it is about data, and I was very surprised in my first month of my joining at Qubole back in 2013 when there was a startup and they were actually generating like 5 or 6 terabyte data every day. So I think, long story short, there's nothing about the volume or one particular thing. As we heard today from Abhijit and Dhaval, variety matters, number of data sources matter, concurrency matters. So even if you have like hundreds of gigabytes of data today, tomorrow you might be reaching some terabyte scale, etc. So it's all about whether your business is going to be data driven. That is all what matters. So I hope that answers the question. We'll probably move to the next section, Matt. All right. So from the poll. All right. Which of these do you use today? Great. Both. So that's great. I think the answer suggests like both data warehouse and data lake. Both are in use. That's great. I mean, that kind of validates what we discussed today. Great. Let's move to the next one. What workloads do you run on your data lake and data warehouse, ELT, ETL, streaming analytics, ad hoc analytics? Great. Quite sort of domination from ETL and ELT side, which is not surprising because it's sort of the underlying or backbone of any data ecosystem. Right. Let's move on to the next one. which of these do you plan to include in your data platform in the next 6 to 12 months? Both. Wow. So yeah, I think great. I mean, I think it's we are seeing change in trends and all those things and clarity in people's minds. So that's fantastic. Both have significance and in their own importance. Great. Let's go to the next one. What challenges are you facing with your data lake or warehouse right now? Let me look at the security and governance. Yeah, not surprising. The cost management. Yep. So yeah, that's kind of quite validating as we discussed today. Cost Explorer was one of our recent Qubos product addition. So that kind of validates and also yeah, it's pretty much right on the out. All right. Do we have any other sections on the board? All right. So we are on the time. So guys, thank you very much, everyone, for your time joining us on the webinar today. And once again, I thank you both, Dhaval and Abhijit, to spending time and talking about your experiences and your journey and sharing your insights. So once again, thank you very much, everyone. I hope everyone you have great time and stay safe. And the recording will be shared as mentioned on the slide. So all right, thank you again, everyone. That concludes our webinar today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.